With the 15th anniversary of Minecraft and its recent 1.21 update, I've seen a wave of new players, many of them adults, joining the community to discover how a ragtag indie game had the staying power to become a decade-and-a-half global phenomenon. But for all its charm and potential, the same sandbox style that grants it such appeal can also be a double-edged sword, with a huge learning curve for an inexperienced player. If that's you, you're in the right place, and welcome to Minecraft CavesNotes. The goal of this series is to create a library of easy-to-digest guides for understanding the basics of the Minecraft world. Things like how monsters spawn, what types of terrain and friendly creatures exist, types of movement and travel, and the physics of a world where stone stays put in midair and water can be replicated. Well, you finally built that little house on the prairie. How do we make sure that we keep it safe? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Mob spawning, and how to keep mobs from spawning. There are actually several different ways that mobs can spawn, but one of the most common ones is just random spawning. And although this works a little bit differently in both Java and Bedrock Edition, there are some similarities that we can talk about. Here in the center of this ring, this armor stand with iron armor represents you, the player. Starting with this orange line here, at about 16 blocks, mobs will be able to detect the player and move to attack you. Just outside of 24 blocks is where mobs can actually spawn in relation to the player. Within this red circle, as long as you are standing in that spot where the armor stand is, no mobs will spawn. But outside the circle, mobs will be able to spawn normally. At a distance of 32 blocks or more from the player, mobs may randomly despawn, depending on certain time-based rules in each edition. Now in Java, zombies follow a different detection range than the rest of mobs, and they can detect the player at 35 blocks away. Though I haven't created a circle here, you can see just how far that is from the player. It's quite a distance. On Bedrock specifically, simulation distance is what sets how mob spawning works and how far away some of these numbers are. At the lower simulation setting of 4, the despawning range is at 44 blocks. Now on Java Edition and on Bedrock, if the simulation is higher, despawning occurs way out at the 128 block mark, which is quite a ways away from the player. But keep in mind that all this space in here, between the outer green line and the blue line, mobs may randomly despawn. While I have these demonstrated using circles, it's important to note that these are actually spheres, which means these same distance limitations also apply vertically and in any direction as well. So for example, as you're walking along the surface, these spheres are also extending underground into the caves where mobs may be spawning under you. They are not confined just to horizontal space. One other way that mobs can spawn is by monster spawners. These are typically going to be found in zombie, spider, or skeleton variants. However, other types of monster spawners do exist in certain areas, certain structures. When a player is within 16 blocks of a monster spawner, the spawner will light up and it will begin spawning mobs. If a player steps out of this range, we can see that the spawner goes silent. Now for most monster spawning to occur, mobs typically need 3 things. They need light, or technically lack of light. They need space, and they need surface. We'll talk about surface first. In general, mobs can spawn on the tops of any solid, non-transparent block. To understand what that means, solid in this case refers to the top face of the block being completely closed off. In this case, for example, a slab can be placed on either the top or bottom half of an air cube. These are known as bottom slabs and top slabs. Mobs can spawn on top slabs, but not on bottom slabs. Likewise with stairs, an upside-down stair creates a solid surface on the top, allowing mobs to spawn on top of them, but they cannot spawn on stairs. Transparent blocks are blocks that light passes through, even though they might otherwise be considered solid on the top, such as glass, leaves, scaffolding, and shulker boxes. There are other types of these blocks, but these are just here to give you an example. So in terms of solid versus non-solid, this first example here, we have wool, and mobs can spawn on this wool, but if we place down carpet, this carpet actually takes the space of a whole cube, even though only the very bottom pixel is covered. So that means that the top of this carpet is essentially an air block, and mobs will not be able to spawn there. Likewise, things like trapdoors, slabs, stairs, fences, iron bars, walls, redstone components will prevent mobs from spawning in that block. Solid blocks, on the other hand, encompass a lot of things in the game, so it would be unrealistic for me to place them all here, but just to give you some examples, things like wood, stone types, cobblestone, etc., even something like amethyst or quartz. As long as it's a full solid block on the top, mobs will be able to spawn there. Additionally, liquid like water will typically stop most mobs from spawning, but bear in mind that the rules for surface don't completely apply to actual mob spawners, just to the random mob spawning as based on the circles that we showed earlier. Even for the monster spawners, space requirements must be met. Now, in general, for a mob to spawn, the block above the block it spawns on, basically where its feet are, needs to be an air block. Unless, for example, it's something like a drowned that needs to spawn specifically in water. But in most cases, that bottom block is going to be an air block, and then depending on the height of the mob, it will need to have either an air block or some sort of transparent block or non-solid block above its head. So for example, a zombie can spawn in a 2-block space, as can skeletons, whereas a creeper is a bit shorter and can actually spawn with a trap door on the block up above its head. Endermen, on the other hand, are roughly 3 blocks tall and actually require that extra space. They could not spawn in the same place that a zombie can. Likewise, for spiders, they actually require a 3x3 surface area to spawn on, and then the block above them, even though they're only 1 block tall, the block above them must not be solid. These slabs will work, but they cannot spawn if the gap is only 1 block high. And then, as mentioned, some water mobs. This changes a little bit, and the blocks will need to be water instead of air blocks. And finally, let's talk about light. Minecraft looks at 2 different kinds of light: sunlight and block light. For starters, let's take a look at sunlight. Any block that is open to the sky directly will have the full light value of 15. If that block is obstructed from the sky somehow, that will change accordingly. So to start, let's take a look at this makeshift cave, and we're going to ignore the torch in the back. That's just so you guys can see, but the torch only affects block light. It doesn't affect sunlight. So in this case, if we move into the cave, our first block here gets a decrease of 1 from its sunlight value. So instead of being 15 like this one is 14, and then 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. Once we get to this red area, we are too far from the mouth of the cave to receive any sunlight. Now, light does not travel in a straight line. It follows the path of the blocks themselves. This is known as taxicab distance. What I mean by that is you'll notice that on the right side, our red wool is 1 block closer, and that's because the sun has been blocked from this right side here. So whereas this is 15 and this is 14, this block right here has a light level of 13, and so on and so forth until we get to the back. So our 0 value comes closer to the mouth of the cave because the light doesn't travel straight, it has to go around the corner. I know that sounds weird, but that's the way it works. Likewise, the same thing happens if we drop down. Going from this 15, our 14 is actually the block above the wool here, or above the air above the wool, and this block is 13, and so on and so forth. So by the time we get down here, our 0 level actually comes much sooner because we've gone down 3 blocks. Now, liquids and leaves don't block sunlight, but they do filter it. The way this works is a little bit interesting. In the case of this column here that has water in it, the amount of layers of water actually doesn't matter. What matters is at what level the highest layer of water is. Once we get down below the water, every block we go down, we decrease by 1 light level, until when we reach the bottom here, if this torch wasn't here, this layer that I'm standing on would be a light level of 0, whereas just 1 up it would be 1, and then 2, 3, 4, and so on up through the column. Interestingly enough, this is exactly the same even if the water up there were lava. I should point out that for these simulations, this dark glass is tinted glass, and it is a special block that allows us to see through it, but it does not allow light to pass through it. Now, leaves work similarly to how liquid does, and although it's not too important to get into all the details, just know that on top of these leaves, the light level is 15 due to the direct sunlight, but then in the leaf blocks themselves, the light level is 14, 13 under it, and then 12, 11, and 10 down here on the surface. And I can use Java's debug menu to show you this. You look on the left side of the screen where it says client light is 10, and that is 10 from sky and nothing from the block lighting. These numbers do not add, it is simply the higher of the two. Now in Minecraft, some undead mobs, such as zombies and skeletons, will burn up in sunlight. However, these mobs will often try to seek shade in the daytime, and what shade means depends a little bit on the version, but in general, there are some similarities. Solid blocks are going to prevent mobs from burning up in the sunlight, whereas transparent blocks, like glass, will not. Leaves, however, are a special case that act like a solid block in terms of providing shade for mobs to hide under. Oops, I missed. Water is another interesting case that will allow mobs to survive under it, even if they're not standing in the water themselves. Although, a mob that is standing in water will not burn even though it is exposed to sunlight up top. When it comes to non-solid blocks, like a fence post, this will not stop a mob from spawning. Whereas something like a slab, even though this is a bottom slab, in Java this will stop mobs from burning in the sunlight. However, this is not the case for all of these blocks on bedrock. Anyhow, you get the idea. Now let's talk a little bit about block lighting. Here I have 15 different rows of blocks. Each of these are organized based off of how much light they put out. On the right here, we have light levels of 1. That means that the smallest amethyst bud, as well as skulk sensors, calibrated skulk sensors, Even the brewing stand and end portal frame blocks actually do emit a very small light level, but it's only on the block that they occupy. The medium amethyst bud actually emits a light level of 2. This means that it will produce light for the block that it's on, as well as one block in each direction from it. For level 3, a single candle, a magma block, or a respawn anchor that has just one of its 4 charges will emit light on the block that it's on, plus out another 2 blocks in every direction. Note for these solid blocks, the maximum light level that they emit is actually in the block themselves that they occupy, so you won't see that. So if this is a light level of 3, the closest I can get is right next to it or on top of it, which will be a light level of 2. At level 4, we have large amethyst buds and the weathered copper bulb. The only item in the game that has a block light of 5 is the amethyst cluster. Here at 6, we have double candles, we have the sculk catalyst, and inside our water here, we have a sea pickle. At 7, we have redstone torches. We also have glow lichen, which you will find naturally spawning in caves, which can reduce some of the monster spawning in that area. And then the enchantment table and the ender chest also give off some light as well. And then we have the next level of the respawn anchor here. In correction, this is the weathered copper bulb at level 8. The other one over there is the oxidized version. At level 9, we have the 3 candle grouping, 2 sea pickles, and even redstone ore, but only when it is actually walked on. Level 10 is reserved for essentially soul fire, soul campfire, soul lantern, and soul torches all give out the same amount of light, as does crying obsidian. Level 11 is another level that's hard to achieve. The only block in the game that has this light level is the respawn anchor with 3/4 charge. 12 is where candles max out. 3 sea pickles will also give you this level, as will the exposed copper bulb. Now again, 13 is another odd one, no pun intended. Furnaces, blast furnaces, and smokers will actually emit a light level of 13 when they are cooking or smelting. In their normal state, they are 0. At 14, we have torches, end rods, and glowberries. And then at level 15, we have sea lanterns, we have fire, if you were to stand inside of it. We have regular lanterns, glowstone, lava, once again. These are values that are for the block itself, so to get 15, you'd need to be inside of it. We have shroom lights. I almost forgot what they were called. Here we get our maximum light value out of 4 sea pickles. And then our 3 varieties of frog lights, regular campfires, redstone lamps, beacons, normal copper bulbs, the jack-o'-lantern, as well as the conduit, and a fully powered respawn anchor. Now again, at this point in time, a lot of these blocks may be unfamiliar to you, and that's alright. We're going to talk about torches specifically, but it is important to know that a torch does not put out the maximum amount of light. It's very close at 14 out of 15. But if you are looking to light up an area in the future, once you have access to some other materials, you have plenty of options. So as we mentioned before with sunlight, block light works the same way as far as using taxicab difference. That means that the torch here on this white wool is emitting a light level of 14, and as we step out from it, it goes down to 13, 12, 10, etc. No, 11 comes after 10. You know what I mean. And here at the black wool, this is where we reach a light level of 0. And you'll notice that this essentially creates a diamond shape. So this is the pattern of light that we'll be able to see on the ground. Now, as far as the other pieces of colored wool that I have placed around here, if you wanted to ensure that monsters were not going to spawn, you would want to cover the area with light. And because of this diamond pattern, the way you would do that is ensure that the next torch you placed was no farther away than this block. Now, how far is this? Well, the easiest way to remember is because this is shaped like a diamond, you can count diagonally the same number as the light level of this torch. In this case, 14 blocks diagonally is where you need to place your next torch. If we go one more to 15, then that line of black blocks will still remain unlit. Now, as far as the blue blocks, I have placed these blue blocks out diagonally 10 blocks. Now, the reason for this is my recommended distance. And that is because, as we mentioned with the cave lighting, you're not typically going to be building a nice flat area like this. And if you're going up or down a couple of levels, you're not going to get the full 14 block distance. But in most cases, as long as your terrain is somewhat gentle, 10 blocks out diagonally will be enough. And then by placing your light there, you can actually cover this area quite efficiently without using a ton of torches. So let's see what this looks like at nighttime. So here's that cute and awkward little house that I built here on the prairie. And, you know, I've just decided to settle down. For a space this small, I actually really only need one torch inside, but aesthetically I put one on each wall. And now I want to make sure that we don't have mobs spawning all over outside of it. Well, what I definitely recommend to you is, if you want to put some light on the exterior of your building, you can. But for that part, just do it as however you think it looks nice. Do it aesthetically. And then, as far as the ground goes, I've used this pattern that I showed you with the 10 block diagonal torch placement. And let me show you what that looks like as far as mob protection using light. And as you can see, there's really only a handful of torches here. I think it's about 12 or something like that for the exterior. 12 torches there to get an effect that looks like this. As you can see, we have quite a big area of coverage with light here, and we didn't have to place a lot of torches. These darker X's that you'll see in between, we can see that the lowest we ever get is 4 on the block light value. I'll also go ahead and place this torch pattern out on the rings from earlier to show you what it looks like. So you can place these torches however you like, and of course, again, depending on the variation in your terrain, you may need to do things differently. But, just for reference, by using this diagonal pattern, we can light up this entire spawn area for bedrock at low simulation distance, at least, with only 36 torches. Well, I hope that you learned something useful today, and that this helps you stay safe out there in your survival world. One more thing. I think it's probably worth mentioning the topics that I didn't cover today. For example, the mob cap. I mentioned that the spawn conditions and the way it works are a little different between Bedrock and Java. The actual numbers are not super important. Just know that in the overworld, on Bedrock, you are likely to see less mobs on the surface, while in Java, you are likely to see more mobs overall. In addition to the 2 types of spawning that we talked about today, there's actually quite a few more, but most of them are special cases. Some mobs spawn specifically in certain structures. I will probably dedicate a video to going over structure spawning, as well as maybe some of the special case spawning like phantoms and wardens and things like that. Whether you're using light or slabs or carpets or water, preventing mobs from spawning in a large area is known as spawn proofing. Now, Here we focused more on just being safe around your world, but as you become more experienced, you may be interested in learning about something called mob farming. Mob farming is essentially exploiting the game's mechanics to get thousands of items from a specific type of mob, usually by creating some kind of a contraption, maybe with some sort of automatic killing system. Doing this is certainly more of an advanced topic, but it's definitely interesting if you want to follow up on it. And then finally, there are ways in both Java and Bedrock to stop the normal random mob cycle from happening at all. To do this, a player needs to create a contraption called a mob switch. And again, although this is more of an advanced topic and probably something you don't need to know right now, I will link videos from other creators for both Java and Bedrock on how to do this. Well, I think that's it, so let's get back to Other Me. If there's anything that I may have missed, questions that you have, please leave them in the comments and I'll try and answer those. I look forward to seeing you next time, and as always, thank you for watching.